The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Mario Lopez.
David Taylor.
Brent Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine. The one and only Chael Sonnen. And you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Another episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant here with you today, joined by Andy Hamilton from his palatial offices at the Dan Gable Wrestling Hall of Fame Museum, actually the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, if I can get the name right. The Track Wrestling Satellite Office. Mr. Hamilton, how is the wonderful world of Cedar Falls, Waterloo treating you?
I tell you what, JB, it's awesome. I woke up this morning and the very first shirt in my drawer that I see is my Matt Talk Podcast Network t-shirt. So that's what I've got on. I came on, I actually have a pullover over that, and Kyle Klingman of the Gable Museum, the executive director, as I walked in the door, said, "I like your shirt." And I said, "Are you talking about my pullover or are you talking about my Matt Talk Online t-shirt?" He was talking about both. So things are well in the Cedar Falls, Waterloo Metroplex today.
Yeah, I mean, and there's something about the term plex, because there's the crossplex, which is right basically across the street from you guys, which hosts, it's starting to host some more wrestling events there.
Yeah, we're getting lots of wrestling in this area. We've had some big tournaments at the Young Arena, a couple blocks down the street. Obviously, always big stuff going on in Cedar Falls, whether it be in the Unidome for some of those USA wrestling events, the preseason nationals, folk style nationals, or across the street from there in the West Gym for Northern Iowa, or right up the street from a couple blocks down the street from where I live, Cedar Falls High School. So I don't have to go very far to catch some good high school wrestling or college wrestling or some national level events.
No, I spent a year working with Kyle in our Wrestling 411 outfit, and I'm just curious what that dynamic is like with you and him now, because he'll walk up to you and he'll ask you a really, really direct, blatant question that you got to know, he's got to know the answer to, and you're like, what is he getting at? Is this a trick question? He keeps you on your toes.
He asks the most random questions at the strangest times, but you're right. You're absolutely right. I love it.
Hey, Andy, does your car like gasoline?
And, we talk a lot of wrestling history. We, every now and then Kyle will bring up a dual meet, and we did it prior to the Iowa-Oklahoma State week. We talked a lot about going back to, I don't know, 03, 04, 05, 06. And we just tried to see if we could remember the scores and which guys wrestled in those dual meets. And, surprising, we're both 40, and I know the horsepower in my brain's running a little bit low. I'm sleep deprived here for about 3 or 4 months, but I got Kyle. I stumped Kyle on a few of them, so I felt pretty good about what I was doing on that, because that guy has the memory of an elephant.
Yeah, I at least fake it. I at least have it quickly at my disposal. Like, oh, Kyle asked me a question. Within 10 seconds, I know where to get it. I may not know it off the top of my head, but I know where to get it. So at least I can keep him at bay that way. But as we talk about what's rolling in college wrestling, we'll get to that in a moment. But you talk about being sleep deprived. The work Track Wrestling has done is in creating itself as a media website, not just a tournament software option. We're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing weekly notebooks from each conference in the Division I era. We're seeing, small college coverage, on-site event coverage from things like the multi-divisional national duels. And, it keeps you up late at night, but, and you've been on the road quite a bit, but what's it been like, in the first couple months as the, I guess what is your official title with Track Wrestling anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question. Community manager, I think. I mean, I'm wearing a lot of different hats right now, so I don't know that we've ever clearly defined
you have not
my
DTR'd.
title other than other than community manager. I think,
you have not DTR'd. You have not defined the relationship yet.
Sure. Yeah, but it's been awesome so far. It's been it's wrestling 24/7, 365, and I love that. I mean, one of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the newspaper business. 12 years at the Iowa City Press-Citizen, 5 at the Des Moines Register. I left the Press-Citizen in 2011 for the Des Moines Register, mainly because it was an opportunity to cover more wrestling. And as time went along, our staff got cut a little bit, and I was asked to do some more things, which I was fine with, but my true passion is covering wrestling. And last year I didn't really get a dive into wrestling and go full throttle on it until, National Signing Day was over with in February. I mean, I helped out with, covering the Big Ten championship game in the Rose Bowl for Iowa football. I was covering college recruiting. And so I didn't, I felt like I was getting a late start in the wrestling season where we were really hitting it hard for about 6 weeks. And this has been hitting it hard since the Olympics started. And so, it's been great from that standpoint that it's been nonstop wrestling. I'm really enjoying that. I'm having a blast getting to follow more high school kids from, beyond. My scope in the past was just what was going on within Iowa State borders and then the elite kids nationally. But getting to follow more kids across the country, in some of these TrackCast events, I've seen a lot of kids from California. I've seen a lot of kids out east. I've seen, tons of kids in the Midwest in the surrounding states to Iowa. And it's been fun watching them. It's been a lot of fun on so many different levels. I mean, telling the stories at the multi-divisional national duels. The one thing that I've always said is in this business is everybody's got a story to tell. It's just a matter of going out and finding that story. And so that's what we're going to continue to strive to do in the weeks, months, and years to come, to find those great stories, not just the elite levels in college and high school, Division I in high school, but also, there's a ton of great stories out there in D2, D3, JUCO, NAIA, the women, and high school, high school wrestling from coast to coast.
Yeah, last count, I think we're starting next year. We'll have 423 college wrestling teams. That includes the women's programs, the junior colleges, the fringe USCAA schools that are varsity but compete with the clubs. I think the official number is 423 based on my record. So you say that everybody's got a story to tell times 423 times how many guys and girls are on those rosters. So probably no shortage of good stories to tell.
No. So if you're out there and you got a good story to tell, hit me up on Twitter. If you're a coach or an athlete, one of your wrestlers or teammates has a good story to tell, do not hesitate to shoot me a message.
Do you sometimes look at some of these great stories that might sniff in and be like, oh man, I would have loved to have written that story?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are about a dozen of them up on my whiteboard right now that need to be told. And we're going to get to them in time. I would love to be telling them right now. But in time we're going to get to them. There are some, going back to my days in the newspaper business that, every year there was one. It seemed like there was one that I tried to tell, like I targeted as the number one thing on my list that before the season's over, I want to tell that story. And I don't remember too many times where I didn't get around to telling that number one story that was on my list. So that's the challenge now, is making sure that before we get too far down the road that we get all these stories told. Because like I said, there's, you look at D3, Riley the Fever going for his 4th title there. And look at some of the ones in D2, like Destin McCauley and his journey. And I could probably, NAIA, Grandview, what they've done the last couple of years. I mean, they doubled up everybody else, and that's the bar that everybody in NAIA wrestling is trying to not just pass Grandview, but they're trying to at least get to the point where they can see Grandview's rear bumper again, and so I think that's pretty fascinating. I think what Wartburg has done with 193 consecutive dual wins against Iowa Conference opponents, that's staggering to me. So I know you're a guy that follows wrestling at every level, and you're well aware of these stories. But there's a lot of people that I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure that that we are telling those stories and that they're getting out to the masses in the wrestling world. That we're not just hammering the best of the best in Division I, but we're also telling these great stories that are out there at the multi-divisional level.
Yeah, you mentioned Wartburg. They'll be coming up here to Minneapolis February 2nd for the Battle of the Bergs. I got a call from Augsburg. They want me on the microphone that night, so I'll be doing the PA for that duel. But when you talk about that dual meet win streak in conference with Wartburg, what people need to understand is the Iowa conferences where Wartburg exists is not like, it's just Wartburg and everybody else. On paper, it appears that way, but the Iowa Conference is like the Big Ten of Division III wrestling. It is where the dominant forces and place winners come from these schools. So to see Wartburg have that much dominance over such a good conference, let's see comparison be like, I don't know, like the Iowa runs when they weren't losing any dual meets in the Big Ten for a number of years, but amplify that times like almost 200 duels in a row.
Well, I think they're coming up on their 25th, aiming for their 25th consecutive Iowa Conference title. So that goes right alongside that Iowa streak, right? I mean, was it, Big Ten streak of 25 in a row that Minnesota broke in 1999? But
that's a Kyle Klayman question.
Exactly. Yeah, but so when you were saying that, when you were leading into that question, that was exactly what I was thinking. It was the same thing. It's the Big Ten conference of Division III wrestling, and what they've done is phenomenal. They've gone through a coaching change, and Eric Keller is taking the torch from Jim Miller and kept that thing rolling. I think that I mentioned Grandview, and Grandview comes out of that same family tree with Nick Mitchell and his staff. A lot of them taking things that they learned at Wartburg and carrying those things on. So it's pretty fascinating to see what those two programs are doing right now, and the philosophies that they share and similarities that they share.
Yeah, if you go to like a Wartburg party after the D3 championships, it's you see a bunch of Grandview guys. We joke that those two teams are cousins, which is why we'll never see them wrestle each other in a dual meet. Although I got to think for Iowa fans, that would be a really cool thing to watch. Yeah,
in fact, that's something that I think Kyle has even joked around about getting some Grandview guys and some Wartburg guys and putting them here in the Gable Museum in the wrestling room, having a little exhibition in there. But I don't know if we're going to make any traction on that or not. But you're absolutely correct. I mean, that's something that I've heard a lot of wrestling fans in Iowa talk about. I don't know if there's much desire on both ends of the coaching staff, just because of the relationships there to want to see that, but certainly would be a lot of fun.
Sure thing. One thing that was always a lot of fun is any duel in Carver Hawkeye Arena, and the Hawkeyes hosted Penn State on January 20th. We saw a lot of storylines there. Of course, the big one was Mark Hall's red shirt being pulled going out there and then promptly losing to Alex Meyer. Anything in your experience kind of compare to this type of scenario where you've seen, oh, wow, okay, they're pulling the red shirt, it's at Carver, and things, the Carver magic interjects itself and crazy things happen. But, Penn State won the duel comfortably, but there's still a lot of fun things about that duel.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could pick apart something almost at every weight class, right? I mean, Gilman and Suriano, and I think a lot of people thought Gilman was clearly the guy to beat at that weight class, and I don't think too many people, Friday night that changed much for him. But Suriano was right there. I mean, Gilman, this is we haven't seen him struggle to get to the legs like that this year, like he did Friday night. He got there one time. He finished his only shot, and that was the difference. But boy, Nick Suriano's a hard guy to score against. And then you go down to 33 and what Corey Clark's been through this year with the shoulder issue. And seems to me like he's getting better each time out. And, then certainly 41-49, the drama there. I mean, tremendous comeback by Jimmy Gulabon. Gets nothing really going the first two periods, and then all of a sudden, we've seen it with Jimmy in the past where it's like third period rolls around and he just puts puts the pedal to the metal and his pace like doubles, and he can make a lot of things happen when he does that, and that's what he did in the third period against Topher Carton with. I can't think of a match that I've seen recently where a guy had such a struggle to score points for 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden one takedown after another. The dam broke in the third period, and then 49 to me the match of the year thus far. Just everything that went into that with Sorensen and Rutherford and the history there. It's 14-1 in two matches last year, and you wonder like what's the gap going to be this year. And all of a sudden, Brandon Sorensen, who, he couldn't get the escape in the Big Ten championships against Zane Rutherford. And I don't remember the escape in the national finals, whether it was one that Sorensen or that Rutherford gave him or whether it was one Sorensen earned. But, Rutherford gets a takedown in the opening minutes and Sorensen up and out right away and back in on him. And gets his first takedown and gets another one in the third period to go ahead. And Rutherford, just so much action there. Tremendous job by both guys. The effort that they put out there in that match was phenomenal. And both guys just you could tell at the end the tanks were getting pretty close to dry, but. Shoot, there are 6 other matches too, and I could go on and on about those, but just a tremendously entertaining dual meet. You mentioned the Mark Hall decision. I think going into the dual meet, there were a lot of questions about that. And I think up until an hour before the dual meet, there were questions on the Iowa end about what are we going to see out of Sam Stoll, and then an email comes out from University of Iowa Sports Information that the Hawkeyes are going to be without Sam Stoll the rest of the season. So even an hour before the dual meet started, we had storylines developing on that one.
Yeah, one thing about the Rutherford Sorensen match is I've got it open. I've got Big Ten Network open as I'm at the Nebraska-Minnesota duel, and Jeff Beachy from the Guillotine sit next to me. We're kind of, there's I don't know, it might have been a snoozer of a match, might have been at halftime or something, and might have been at the break. We're both watching, and he goes, "Oh wow, Sorensen took him down." I said, "Look, took him down pretty easy." And I remember saying to Jeff, "Well, it's because Rutherford knows he's going to score again." It's one of those things like, one, you get one against guys like that, and then you usually don't get another. And, so, I mean, it was one of those things that even during that break, there were people just huddling over my computer starting to watch. And then by the time the Minnesota-Nebraska duel was over, I had done a couple interviews. Then here comes, the crowd of people. I look over and there's like 15 people surrounding my computer on press row, and watching Gunther and Joseph. Then all of a sudden, here comes Mark Hall, and you hear this gasp from people that are like, "Oh, he's wrestling!" And it's the next thing you know, I say, "All right, let's brighten up the screen. Let's go full screen. Everybody sit back and enjoy." And it's just people are like, "He's wrestling!" And I mean, there must have been 25, 30 people. This is after the duel is over. There's nobody in the arena except for the 25 people watching this match. So it definitely had some local flavor here as far as from people where Mark Hall was concerned, but. Were you surprised at all that Meyer pulled that one out?
No, especially not when it was tied in the third period or Meyer went ahead in the third period. I mean, the guys that beat Alex Meyer are the ones typically that beat him in the first two periods, and he's a guy that does his best work in the third period. The one thing that really stood out to me, seeing them side by side out there, was just the size differential. I mean, that was alarming to me to see how much bigger Alex Meyer looked than Mark Hall in that match. Was I surprised that Meyer won the match? No, because he's beaten. He's pulled out some pretty good big wins here in the past, and I mean, we are talking about a fifth-year senior who's an All-American versus a true freshman. So not totally shocked by it. I think Mark Hall is a tremendous talent. I think that that's obvious, right? I mean, he's got a couple world titles on his resume, and ran through the scuffle with earning OW honors in a really loaded bracket down there. But that being said, I mean, freshmen, you see some ups and downs from them. I mean, I think back to Lincoln McElravy, when he made his debut. He lost in his debut in Carver Hawkeye Arena when Iowa decided to pull him, when Gable pulled him out late in the season. And everybody thought, the sky was falling after he lost a match to a kid from Northwestern. And then later in the year, we see McElravy at the top of the podium in Ames at the 1993 NCAA championships. So that's why I think, now I'm not saying Mark Hall is going to be the next Lincoln McElravy and win 3 NCAA titles and only lose 3 matches in his career. But I think the people that are rushing to judgment on whether this was the right move to pull him out or not based off of Friday night's match, I think they need to pump the brakes and let's give this thing time and see how it turns out. But I think certainly on paper now it makes Penn State probably the team to beat. I mean, they're number 1 now in our team rankings. You got to look at what they're going to get out of bonus points now from Rutherford and Nolf and Nickel, and I think that this is going to make Penn State the team that we're going to see everybody chasing in March. So pretty fascinating though stuff that they pulled him out at this point and gave him his debut in Carver Hawkeye Arena against Alex Meyer.
Yeah, it's one thing that you see, and I'm not pointing out anybody that put a headline in there with the word stun, but let's just think, like you said, pump the brakes. Think about this. You said it right. 5th-year senior All-American versus true freshman. Don't care how talented you are. Wait a minute. Okay. In what world, in any other situation, if this is, we've got Gilman, same situation, true freshman, close match. I mean, is Gilman stunning Nick Sirianno? No. Is Meyer stunning Mark Hall? No, I don't think so. So I honestly thought Hall would win the match, but that didn't mean I didn't think Meyer was capable. I mean, you've got Meyer who loses to Gordon Wolf, who can beat good guy. It's just, I think his enigmatic nature is what maybe was the most surprising for people, not the fact that he's talented enough to be an All-American and has been. So moving forward, you touched on the Sam Stoll thing a little bit. Now in Des Moines, at your old paper, not Des Moines, right up the road in Ames, there's been some rumblings about Kevin Jackson. What are you hearing on that situation in regards to Jamie Pollard's comments and KJ kind of addressing Pollard's point that says, he's got a job to do?
Well, Jamie Pollard came out a little over a week ago on Iowa State's coaches call-in show for typically the basketball coaches on there. He was on there, and my old colleague Tommy Birch tweeted it out that Pollard had said, and I'm paraphrasing here, basically, we're not getting the job done, and if we don't get the job done, we're going to get somebody, if the job doesn't get done, we're going to get somebody in there who will do the job, more or less is what he was saying. So I think that that was, from my vantage point, pretty eye-opening from the standpoint that we'd never really heard Jamie Pollard speak up and say things in those terms before. Guy that hadn't really said a whole lot about wrestling and the direction of the program in the past. And, I think that it's pretty interesting to look at it. I mean, Iowa State, clearly, I mean, they're 1-7 now. They got 2 tough dual meets coming up this weekend, Oklahoma State. It could be staring 1-9 in the face here. That's not what anybody associated with Cyclone Wrestling wants or expects or accepts. And, Kevin Jackson would be the first to even say that. But, you're looking at it from that standpoint, where the Cyclones are now versus what the expectations are for that program. But also you look at it from the other standpoint, and Kevin's got a couple high-powered recruiting classes coming in. And so from where I sit, it's interesting to see how they finish up and where this situation goes down the road, because of those two things I just explained. They're not where they want to be now, but there's some talent waiting in the wings. And will the Cyclones right the ship? Will Kevin Jackson get a chance to coach that talent a year from now? And I think he's got one more year left on his contract, if I'm not mistaken, one more year after this year. So certainly going to be an interesting situation to monitor here over the course of the next 3 months.
Yeah, I think while Pollard wasn't exactly pulling the whole Steinbrenner vote of confidence angle on him, which usually was the death knell for Yankees managers if you're talking baseball, but talking about the record, that's something to bring up. Let's just look at from just a statistical standpoint and realize Iowa State does have a better schedule than the schools I'm about to mention. But if you look at just simply winning percentage this year, 143, Cleveland State 1-6, Iowa State 1-7 at .125, the Citadel 1-7, .125, VMI 1-9. That's the teams that, if you're sorting these teams by win percentage, they're sitting with right now, which is, for most people, that would be like bizarro world if things ended up that way.
For sure, and especially with what this team had coming back at the start of the year. You're talking 3 All-Americans, Earl Hall, Leland Weatherspoon, Pat Downey, and Downey's been out quite a bit in the early part of the season, and it probably cost them a couple dual meet wins. But you can look up and down the line at a lot of teams across the country that have lost, maybe a dual meet here or there because they've been missing a key guy, and so that's part of the deal, right? I mean, you've got to wrestle the guys you have, and They just, you look at it too, Gabe Marino, they were expecting more out of him. He had the shoulder deal, a couple shoulder operations, guy that was a couple-time qualifier. Looked like his career was really starting to take off in his sophomore year, and the injuries have kind of held him back. But, there have been some circumstances there that they've gotten in the way of them making progress. But, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, when you start looking at an Iowa State record with 1 win and 7 losses, or whether it's 1-9 after this weekend, or whether they find a way to get one, no matter what it is, we're not used to seeing those numbers are typically the other way around, right? I mean, when you look back at Iowa State through the years, so I know that. So like I've said before, Kevin expects to do a lot better. Kevin expects a lot more from that program. And the one thing that they have done in recent years is they've found a way to put it together in March and right the ship. And I think a year ago we looked at some of the rankings around this time of year, even into February, and it looked like Iowa State might finish, outside the top 30 even, and they find a way to get back up there in the top 15, I think 12th or 11th, somewhere in there. They've done that 2-3 years in a row. They didn't have the best tournament the year that Kyvan Gadsden won the NCAA title. I think, he was kind of the saving grace for them in that tournament. But, by and large here in the last 4 or 5 years, they have found a way to wrestle better in March, and that is going to be absolutely essential for this team. They do have, as I mentioned, the 3 returning All-Americans capable of getting back on the stand again, but they've got to wrestle a lot better. I mean, Earl Hall has been up and down throughout this season. We certainly haven't seen the best from him. Leland Weatherspoon, you mentioned Meyer and how he has lost some matches. He's beaten some good guys. He's lost to some guys that maybe are a little bit head scratchers. Leland Weatherspoon's kind of that same type of guy where if he pops up and beats one of the guys in the top 5, you're not totally shocked. If he loses to somebody who's ranked 20 to 25, you're not totally shocked. So whole key from Iowa State standpoint is starting to get this thing heading in the right direction with some consistency and not seeing the ups and downs.
You know, we're focusing on national things here, but all of a sudden, realizing almost everything I'm asking is this Iowa-centric here because we got the big duel at Carver, Iowa, Ohio State, some big matchups there, none bigger than 133 pounds, Corey Clark, Nathan Tomasello, and this is number 3 and number 4 in the country, the third straight top 5 team that Iowa's going to wrestle. And, you know, you've been around that program a long time. I mean, what do you think Tom Brands is telling his team right now going to, you know, Oklahoma State is 1, then they got 2, then they got 4. And, you know, this is looking at it on paper, depending, you never know who the Buckeyes are going to wrestle. This could be a toss-up match, or it could be, you know, a lot of hype and zero build-up, hopefully with at least we hopefully get 133 out of the way.
Yeah, to answer your first question, what's Tom telling his team? Probably that this is why you come to Iowa, right? I mean, this is what you want to be involved with. I mean, it's Michigan followed by Oklahoma State the next weekend, followed by Penn State last weekend, Ohio State this weekend, Wisconsin. You know, they popped into our top 10 at number 8. Iowa has them next weekend, and then Minnesota, I think we got them at number 10. They're 2 days after Wisconsin, and then the following week they get Nebraska, who's ranked 6th. So, you know, you can't poke too many holes in the Hawkeye schedule this year when you look at it from what they've got from January 5th on throughout the end of the dual season. But absolutely right. When you look at this dual meet Friday night on paper, you know, 33, 41, 49, couple of All-Americans going at it at 74, the returning champ, Miles Martin, and the returning Big Ten champ, and Sam Brooks at 184. Lots of swing matches in there. It's going to be fascinating to see how this thing plays out. I cannot wait for 133 pounds to see how that one shakes down because, you know, Nathan Tomasello looks great this year. What he did to Zane Richards was one of the big eye openers of the season to me. I mean, you just haven't seen too many people put it on Zane Richards like that. And the margins between Corey Clark and Zane Richards have always been pretty tight. But that being said, Corey Clark's a pretty crafty guy who seems to find a way to get a 2-on-1 against everybody, and everybody knows what's coming. And I think that's going to be a fascinating match to watch.
Any thoughts about the performance with Seth Gross and Cade Brock over the weekend? It knocked Cade Brock off, who had just come off the win, albeit controversially over Corey Clark. And, you know, Gross, a former Hawkeye, transferred out to South Dakota State, new weight class. Really just, I mean, I think everybody's talked about after Tomasello, it's just like, okay, it's like playing Yahtzee. Just throw the dice and, you know, any which way will come up probably correct if you could roll it 10 different times.
Yeah, that was one, you know, typically, you know, David Mirkatani does our rankings, and, you know, he'll typically give me a call on Mondays just to go over stuff and let me know what he's thinking on things and kind of let me be a sounding board for him or devil's advocate. And that was one that I know he really struggled with who to put at 2, because, you know, you start looking at it, you said Yahtzee, that's a pretty good analogy, because Gross has lost to Montoya. Montoya's lost to Micic. Micic has lost to Clark and Richards. Richards has lost to Montoya, and you know, I mean, you know, Clark's lost to Brock. Brock's lost to Gross. I mean, it's just one tangled mess right now. And ultimately, what David did is he sorted it out, and I'm sure he'll talk about it on our rankings podcast that we'll do later. You know, we'll record later today, but I think what he came to is he figured you know, we had one tier of guys there with Clark, Gross, and Brock, and Gross is 1-0 in that trio. Brock is 1-1, and Clark is 0-1, and so that's how David got Gross being number 2. Brock being number 3 and Clark being number 4, but you know, there was certainly an argument to be made that all these guys have beaten each other, and so we go back to where we were in the beginning, and that was with Clark at the top of the list. So I don't know, you know, and when we were talking about it, I don't know that I told David I don't think there's a right answer here, and I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think that you know, you just be sound in your reasoning. And he sold me on what he was thinking. And so that's where we landed with Gross 2, Brock 3, and Clark 4. But to me, when you look at 1 through 8, I don't think there's going to be a more fun tournament or fun bracket the rest of the way, or fun weight the rest of the way, and fun bracket in March than 133, because certainly these guys have all proven that 2 through 7 or 2 through 8 or whatever there. Nobody's stepped up to the plate and beaten Tomasello yet, although Micic has come close. But 2 through 7 and 8 there it could be determined based off of matchups and style clashes and things like that.
Last thing I want to touch on is the countdown, I guess, to the Bowl Dual Championship Series. As we're looking at it from the NWCA National Duels point of view. Right now, all things go to plan. We're going to see Penn State and Oklahoma State, and then it gets kind of dicey from there on out. And just we know the Pac-12 is not participating. Minnesota and Illinois, I believe, have opted out of this year. So we're looking at, if we're looking at the rankings, we have 7 Big Ten teams ranked, and it looks like that number 8 spot could go to an Indiana, Purdue, depending on who may get hot at the end of the year. I don't think we're going to see a Michigan State or a Maryland, but with 7 of the teams ranked, it pretty much seems that the sorting based on rankings and final placement is really, it depends on that first of all, and then where we see the teams fall. And I talked to Kevin Dresser last week on Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Of course, they want to see Iowa, but Ohio State beats Iowa this weekend. It's pretty much going to be a foregone conclusion if everybody wins out that it'd be Ohio State and Virginia Tech, which Dresser's got no problem with. But where do you see the intrigue with some of these matchups? Is it's almost bracketology to a point. And be like, okay, who do you think's going to see who? And when we're looking 8 signature duels at the end of the year to get people excited for the postseason. So there's a couple of different ways to look at this.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as cut and dry as. Obviously we're going to have 1 versus 2, but we might not have the number 2 Big Ten team against the number 2 non-Big Ten team. When you start factoring into, I know one of the things that the NWCA has, is taking into consideration with this as well is geography, wanting to cut down on travel. And so, will we, I'm just throwing this out there as a hypothetical, but if Iowa and Ohio State are close, could we see, Iowa going to Missouri and Ohio State going to Virginia Tech? I don't know. That could be a possibility. I think, there are some potential. I put it on paper a couple weeks ago of what some of these might look like, and there were some pretty fascinating ones then that looking down the road at it, but I think some of these are probably going to get blown up here over the course of some of the ones I had on paper are going to get blown up over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks. But, seeing what, I don't think anybody really wants to draw Lehigh, because you're looking at a Big Ten team down the road here, maybe, the 5th or 6th Big Ten team.
You could see a Rutgers, you could see a Rutgers, which is local. I think they wrestled last year, and then you could see a Michigan, and those 2 teams have had a pretty good rivalry over the years. So I mean, there's options, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a team out there that's a pretty solid dual team, although they got tripped up Saturday by Cornell in a 1-point duel that had some crazy things happen late in it, but. That's certainly a solid top to bottom team. Cornell looks like they're, starting to get that lineup put together. They've, been waiting to do that all year, with, Dalton Macri out and Palacio out for the first semester, but he's back. I think, probably, I would imagine they're probably trying to get him down to 157 to make themselves a stronger lineup. It'll be interesting to see where Missouri, if it's a team where lots of things have gone wrong for them throughout the year. In terms of injuries, certainly looked like a team that was going to be a contender at the beginning of the year, and then just one thing after another have decimated that lineup. And can the Tigers? I mean, obviously they're not going to have Willie Miklas at 184 pounds, and that's a huge loss to them. But can they? can they get things on track? Can they get Barlow McGee going at 125 and become a little bit more of a force here in February? I think that's one to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, and they got that big duel with Oklahoma State coming up on Friday as well. So interesting matchups there. The thing is, with the move of Jaden Ironman to 141, I saw John Ernesti wrestle earlier this year in the dual meet against Old Dominion. And I'm not saying that Alex Madrigal, for example, is like a barometer of how good I think Ernesti could be, but Ernesti is definitely not a liability at the weight class. Granted, against Cade Brock, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but Ernesti's got a lot of junk. He's pretty seasoned, and he's a guy. He's definitely not a liability, I think. As I said, I'm beating that point home, but depending on how Missouri comes out and fights against Oklahoma State, because they handled Central Michigan pretty well, even with without Miklas in the lineup.
Yeah, and there's you look up and down, right? I mean, there's some matches in there that the Tigers are going to be favored in. I wouldn't, even though it went in Chandler Rogers' favor at the Southern Scuffle with a fall against Daniel Lewis, I think that that's certainly a toss-up at 65, and Missouri's going to have to pull out some. I mean, to pull off the upset there, Levon May is going to have to beat Anthony Colica for the first time this year. And
yeah, they've wrestled like 900 times, man. I mean, it's like 8 or 9 times these guys have wrestled. Oh man.
Yep, for sure. And I don't think it's certainly a gimme for Oklahoma State, but they're certainly heavy favorites. Cowboys are certainly heavy favorites in that dual meet, and But to your point, yeah, I mean, Missouri looks, that win 24-8 convincing over Central Michigan. Looks like the Tigers are starting to get it put back together a little bit here. And to your point about Ernesti, I mean, you look at what Missouri has been through, and yet they're still 9-2. We talked about Iowa State and missing a few guys early in the year, and they're 1-7. So I think that's an absolute credit to Missouri and the depth that Brian Smith has accumulated in that program, because they've been hammered by injuries probably as much as anybody in the country to this point this year.
All right, Andy, I think that's where we're going to wrap things up, as always, providing solid insight from the wonderful world of track wrestling. You can check out Andy's podcast, the Rankings podcast with David Mirikatani. They do the rankings recap and a little bit of a weekend preview, weekend review on trackwrestling.com. That also on the Matt Talk Podcast Network. And of course, David Mirikatani does his Matt Chat segment, where he focuses on interviews with assistant coaches, which is a real interesting niche in terms of the abundance of wrestling podcasts that we have out there, including the 19 on the network. So check that out at MattTalkOnline.com. You can check out the Track Wrestling Podcast on iTunes as well. And Andy, thanks for the time as always insightful. And again, these episodes where you come on, this could be probably a 3 or 4 hour episode just talking about what's going on right now in wrestling.
Well, I certainly appreciate you giving us time, JB. Certainly appreciate everything that you do for us and do for wrestling as a whole. I mean, you keep me informed on a lot of things, and it's always a pleasure for me to come on and talk wrestling with you, whether it be on air or off. So anyway, thank you again.
Always a good time having Andy Hamilton on the show again. As I said at the end, him and I could probably sit there and record and talk wrestling for hours and hours and hours. And just like when I run into fans and friends at tournaments, we just talk wrestling for hours and hours and hours and hours. And just like Kyle Klingman, who's across the hall from him, he can talk wrestling for hours and hours and hours and hours. And this Matt Talk Podcast Network has hours and hours and hours of wrestling talk. All right. And if you like what you hear and you want to contribute to the 19 shows here on the network, specifically keeping this one rolling and contributing to the Hall of Fame Legends show, which, by the way, we have met our first Patreon goal. So now that the Hall of Fame Legends Patreon goal has been met, the Legends series will be a go. So you will get a new episode each month of the Legends series, and we will get rolling with Bruce Baumgartner and Gray Simons are my 2 first targets. So keeping that in mind, the Legend Series, of course, Bruce is an athletic director, and getting time with him. We've been playing phone tag since like Thanksgiving, seriously. So we're working on, Bruce will be the next episode. We've got about 6 of them out there right now. You can go to halloffamelegends.org, and that's where your contributions to the team membership at Patreon go to matttalkonline.com/join the team. All of those funds basically go to fund that show and parts of this show. And the point is I'm donating those files to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So each Hall of Famer that's interviewed for the Legend Series, that will be placed within their profile on the Hall of Fame website and continue to build out for their digital outreach program. So when you will eventually go to the Hall of Fame and they've got the new digital displays and you'll click Sammy Henson's name and read his bio, when you're in the Hall of Fame, you'll be able to hear that episode of him. And Stanley Henson just turned 100 years old. So we've got, he's the, far to my knowledge, maybe the oldest guy ever to be on a podcast, but that's neither here nor there. So that's where the Patreon contributions go to part of the team membership. Of course, yes, there's some of the web hosting fees and things of that nature, but the lion's share of it go to funding projects for you, the listener, you, the fan, you, the team member. And we've got another one that's just come on board. Jason Mitchell, thank you for your contribution, team memberships. And now we're getting to the point where I'm going to have to call up Cliff Fretwell, our gracious gear sponsor from Compound Clothing at cmpteamwear.com. Check them out. We're getting close to the end of the high school. We're close to the postseason with the high school season. Still got some great deals at Compound Clothing at cmpteamwear.com or matttalkonline.com/teamwear. That's kind of a trackable link. But Cliff does a great job at providing us the gear. You heard Andy Hamilton talking about the shirt at the beginning of this episode. Real nice, dry. When you hit the certain level of giving at the Patreon campaign, you will receive said T-shirt. Now, I've got to work on my inventory, folks, and we got a lot of travel coming up. So be patient. They will be coming. They will be coming. They will be coming. Those of you who've already gotten them, yeah, I'm going to probably have an updated run sometime this summer and maybe just go with the feedback I've gotten is the black ones are probably the best. The athletic gray is cool. The indigo ones also cool, but I think I like the black ones the best. They just plus black is slimming. I'm kind of I'm not a I wouldn't say I'm like a super fat guy by any means, but I'm a pretty. I remember when you were a kid, the jeans. If you were a little overweight, husky. Yeah, I'm a big guy. I'm not like, I'm not as big as I used to be. But anyway, enough about my weight class or lack thereof. matttalkonline.com/join the team. Other things you can do to support the network if you don't want to do so financially. Go to iTunes, leave a rating and review for this show or any show on the network, or specifically every show on the network if you like it. I keep this theme that comes in my head from my buddy Dave Jackson's podcast. It's like, if you like what you hear, go tell somebody. That's another homework assignment. We got great podcasts all over this network, and we got about 40 of them for wrestling. So if you like a wrestling podcast, tell your friends about it, whether it's this one, whether it's The Inside Trip, a new show out of Ohio, whether it's the Boys at Blood Round, Flow Radio Live, Bonus Points with Richard M. I mean, I could name everything, but that would take me too long. That's how podcasts grow, folks. Tell somebody about, hey, check out this show, check out this interview. Click that subscribe button on iTunes. You got the podcast app on your iPhone. Go back, hit that subscribe button. That helps everybody out that does a show because it also moves them up in the iTunes rankings. And at one time, I think 6 shows in the past week were ranked in the top 200. 6 Matt Talk shows. Now, there were other shows, Wrestling Mindset with the Zanetti Brothers, FRL. They've been ranked in the top 200 from iTunes, too. So every show you help out does it. But from a helpful standpoint as this network goes, because I've got 19 of them, and this is what I do, and it's for you, the wrestling community, matttalkonline.com/join the team. That also will give you access to that sandbox that I'm talking about. I'm kind of teasing it. An online almanac to research all sorts of lists. I've got every Midlands place winner, every Southern Scuffle place winner, every Fargo place winner, every NCAA place winner, Division I, Division II, Division III, every NAIA place winner, every junior college place winner. Yeah, I've got a lot of that stuff, and I'm going to continue to build this archive for as long as my career goes. This is an ongoing project. This also helps the team membership to work on the time it takes to put all that stuff together, because somebody's got to research it and somebody's got to put it together, and time is money, folks. So if you want to see that project continue to blossom, matttalkonline.com/join the team. All right, I beat you over the head enough with a call to action and, gracefully asking for your financial support. That being said, Great set of shows coming up, and I'm on a recording binge right now, folks, with this show. I just spent an hour and 40 minutes. Don't worry, the show's not going to be that long. With Raleigh Peterkin, who has a book called The Cage: Escaping the American Dream. That interview is going to be a 2-part series because we go in 2 different tracks. So Jim Harshaw is going to be on the program soon. Sarah Levin's doing some great things in St. Louis with her new wrestling club. We'll talk about that in episodes to come. Adam Amin from ESPN going to join us also later in the month. So got some good guests coming up, got some good stories. Of course, the Tax Style Wrestling Podcast with Daryl Weber and his crew. We got, Matt Lindland's coming on for that show. And it's just, it's a great time to be a wrestling fan. The Guillotine recently had a show with Jason Ness and Mac Ryder. That show's got phenomenal numbers. But hey, if you like what you hear, go tell somebody and hit the coffers, matttalkonline.com/join the team. It's really all I got. Andy and I talked a lot about the current event news, so I'm just basically going to close it out with that. I am not traveling until it looks like, if I can go back and look at the calendar, I'm probably not hitting the road until the Pac-12 championships on February 25th. I'll fly out the 24th. That's my next trip. So about a month, I'm going to Augsburg-Wartburg, which will be here in Minneapolis on February 2nd. Probably have some locals. Iowa at Minnesota. I will be there on February 5th. That's Super Bowl Sunday, and doing a bunch of things there. That's all I got for right now. Stick around. Why am I saying stick around? This isn't television. This is a podcast. You can turn this off whenever you want. But just remember, there's 19 shows on this network, and you've got time for all of them. And you've mainly got time for this show because, you see where I'm going here? You've always got time for Short Time. And I don't have any funky outtakes today.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.